I'm Samantha Smith, and I'm a professional storyteller based in Nottingham in the UK, and this is how to tell a personal story for your presentation. In part 1 of this video, I'm going to show you how to identify and craft your personal story, and also I'm going to talk about the storytelling process. Why is storytelling such a powerful tool in presentations? In part 2, I'm going to show you how to work your crafted story into your presentation and how to make it ally and match up with the key message and also the action that you want your audience or your listener to take. And finally, in part 2, I'm going to offer up some storytelling presentation tips to help you tell your story in a presentation. So, there are many reasons why you might need to use a personal story in a presentation. You might need to be in a funding pitch, or you may wish to describe the work that you do, or promote your artwork. A well-told, well-crafted story can really help you because it gets your listener on board so that they can really understand your ideas, your work, and most importantly, you. And just to say, there's lots of other contexts or reasons why you might use these skills and create a personal story for a presentation. For example, you might want to engage students in learning or a workforce in buying into a brand new policy or a branding scheme. And in the sphere of social justice, you might want to use your personal story to help brandish a clear message, a call for social change or a cultural change. Now, before I start and talk about storytelling, I'm just going to give you your first presentation task. 5 questions. So imagine that you're going to be making a presentation or presenting yourself in some way. Here's your 5 questions. 1. Why are you making a presentation? 2. What's your key message? And make that short and snappy, a bullet point if you like. 3. Who's listening? Who's your audience? 4. Why are they there? And lastly, 5. What action would you like your audience to take at the end of the presentation? Now, let that stay on the back burner and let it maybe inform the rest of the training. So, why is storytelling really powerful? I've been a professional storyteller for 12 years, and this process, it isn't some sort of bog standard storytelling process. This is something that I've put together over the many years and the hard graft and the many different contexts in which I do tell stories, including working in children's hospitals, where, as you can imagine, the environment can be really busy and a child might not feel well. So it's really important to be able to engage a child and also to offer opportunities to participate and listen in despite of what's going on. Now, I'm going to ask you to imagine that it's evening and that we are standing outside and that there's a great big circle drawn in the sand. And I'm standing at the back of it and I'm storytelling and you're outside and you are listening as an audience. So I begin to tell you things. And in order to comprehend and describe them to themselves, that you will use your imagination. And in that moment, the quality and type of your listening changes, and that's really important, because instead of analysing and maybe criticising or scrutinising me, the quality of your listening will turn into something that's more creative. And in that way, there's more of an opportunity for some partnership and rapport to develop. I carry on storytelling. You will naturally compare and contrast what I'm saying and doing to how you feel, to your wisdom, your experience, and your memories. Also your tastes. Do you like it? Do you like me? Don't you like it? And all of this will be going on without perhaps you even noticing. And this leads to 2 other things. What I'm hoping is you will maybe take a step or 2 towards me, if you like, into the circle, so that I can really make sure that you're hearing everything I have to say and you understand my key message and can appreciate and consider the action that I want you to take. As I carry on storytelling, you'll maybe make those decisions to like or not like what I'm saying, and that may well extend to you deciding whether you trust me or not, and that's a really interesting point, because you can trust me and trust what I'm saying and like what I'm saying, but also you can trust me, you can trust what I'm saying and not like what I'm saying. And throughout this whole process, we're building a sense of rapport and relationship. We're sort of in it together. And by allowing you to have the maximum opportunity for choice, you can like me, but you don't have to like what I'm saying, or vice versa. Or what happens there is something really interesting, which is I've kind of put you in the driver's seat. You are the creator, and storytelling is actually a really facilitative thing. In a way, a really well told story feels like a gift because it's so immersive and it's lovely. So, all this is happening at the moment, and that's really powerful. And perhaps if you do trust me, you'll consider taking that step into the circle with me. But there's one more really powerful thing that happens. In the process of rapport and relationship, and we're in it together, something around democracy and also equality happens, because I have put you in a facilitative position, because I'm encouraging you to listen with the widest scope of all available opportunities, because this isn't the hard sell, the storytelling process. This is certainly not me having to go out of my way to convince you. And I think that's somehow really appreciated in part of this process. And just to say, if I offer up a content of a workshop, for example, or the content of a presentation, and you get on board in this way, and then I actually change the goalposts, and perhaps, for example, suddenly it turns into, well, this is this, but actually there's a paid opportunity, and if you join me in that, then you can get X, Y, and Z, and there's no real content. Then you will break that trust. I will have broken that trust. You'll lose your trust in me. And actually, that is really hard to get back, if not impossible, and there can be consequences of that, especially in this age of social media. So this is about using the skills and the tips that I'm offering here with a sense of integrity. This is not a manipulative and a big hard sell. This is something much softer and much more about giving people the opportunity to choose. And that is why people will listen to you. And that's why storytelling is the most incredible engagement tool, and it's a wonderful offer for participation. So, to the point where we're going to identify and craft a story. And what we're going to look for is something I call a change story, because this is storytelling for a purpose. Okay, we're going to look at creating something like a 4-minute story. And we have to identify one of those stories. And the way we're going to do it is simply this. You're going to grab a piece of paper, and we're going to think about happy times and sad times in our lives. So up here on the vertical axis, you're going to put happy days, and at the bottom, you'll put something like challenging times. And then across the horizontal axis, you're going to put your ages, age 0 to the age you are now, and fit them all in. Then you're going to have a think. When were the happy times and the challenging times and the difficult times in your lives? And you'll start to plot them on a graph. Happy time at 10, difficult time at 15, happy time at 20, etc. So in the end, you'll end up with a line like this. And I think you'll really enjoy the process. It's a fantastic exercise. And at the end of it, you'll have a very pretty line, and you'll go, oh, look, there's my life. Happy times, challenging times. And maybe put a little cross at the happy and the challenging time. But they're not actually the moments that we're looking for. What we're looking for are the change moments. So there were circumstances which led to those happy times and those difficult times. And it might be your choice, it might have come from externally, it might come from another person, it might have just come out of the blue. Doesn't matter. The point is, we're trying to identify a bunch of stories that we can use to put in a presentation. And they're usually the sort that are really important. So, you'll end up with your little crosses and your little circles around the change times. And so you can identify a change story, and that's the way to do it. Now, for the purposes of the learning through the 2 videos, I'm going to give you a little case study that I've just pulled out of the ether. And it's about Federico. Federico's been a potter for 15 years, and he's hoping to make a presentation for a competition so that his artwork, his pottery collection, will be used in the exhibition. And it's very prestigious, and he's very excited. Now, he got into pottery through his granddad, so he was not allowed to enter his granddad's studio until he was 10. It was like a forbidden world. And then one day he was allowed in, and he went in, and after school, for 5 days, his granddad taught him all about the resources and the tools and the clay, and he tried to throw a pot, and eventually, on the Friday, he managed to make a really good pot, and his granddad put his arm around him, and he pointed to the pot, and he said, "That is a perfect pot." And in that moment, Federico knew he wanted to do this forever. So that's a little case study that we'll use as an example of how to use the tips to identify and craft a story. So step 1 was finding your change story. And step 2, well, you could call it don't waffle, or you can call it top and tail. Basically, we don't need all the story, and actually it's really hard, especially when you're talking about your own stories, to make it short and sweet. So you have to be really thoughtful about it. And basically, you've got to decide when you're going to start your story. You don't want to say too much, but you need to get people into that story as soon as possible. So when's the best point? Well, I think it's not Federico walking from school, and it's not him even putting his hand on the brass door handle to get into the studio. I think he's in the studio and it starts there. And I think the story ends when his grandfather says, "That is a perfect pot." So you're topping and you're tailing, and you have to be quite tough with yourself, because this is a story for a purpose and it's only going to be a few minutes long. So topping and tailing is your second stage, second point. And third is that you use the present tense when you're describing your story to yourself and you're formulating it. Use I. A couple of reasons for that. It's a really good hook. It brings people right into the story. It makes it very immediate. But most importantly, people will either think about you in the story, or they'll see it through your eyes. But either way, it'll help them relate to you, which is one of the purposes of using a personal story. Now, after that, you're going to think about don't waffle number 2. And that point number 4, is actually about having just a beginning, a middle, and an end to your story with a purpose. Because, once again, you don't want to give too much information because it can cause confusion. So you can say, and this happened, and that happened, and the other happened, and you'll get your information nice and crisp and clear and economic. And that's what you need to do, because this story has got to help you set the scene for the rest of your presentation. But after looking at all that hard work and editing, what you can do for the next step is that you can think about some really luscious, juicy, sensory description. So, in your story, what can you see, hear, smell, feel, or touch? Can you see the slanted sunlight through the windows, lighting up all the particles of dust in the air? Can you smell homemade lemonade or a soap that's made of mint or herbs? And what's the feel of that workbench like? Is it all rutted and pitted, and has it got blobs of hard clay on it, etc., etc.? Now, going back to what I've just said about the storytelling process, those little moments of sensory description will help your story be immersive, because it will give a really nice pack a punch for the descriptive and the imaginative elements of your story. As I described, that's a really important part of encouraging a more conducive and creative listening. And your final step, well, it's excruciating. Edit, rehearse, edit, rehearse, edit, rehearse. Yes, I'm afraid to say, it's really hard, repetitive and boring work. But what you don't want to be doing is having to refer to a script all the time, because as soon as you do that, what you're doing is breaking your connection with the audience, and that's no good. You want to get rid of that script as soon as possible. If you think it's really hard to learn word by word by word and verbatim, as it were, then why don't you look at Tony Buzan's mind mapping or spidergrams, where you learn by having a series of points and then building them up together. And in fact, that gives you a little bit more freedom to chat with your audience and to respond if there's any sudden changes or people suddenly ask you a question, because it's a little bit more improvisational. But either way, that's the way forward, and you really should video yourself. It's really difficult, I know, but you'll see all sorts of information, and it will really help you to narrow it down, because the story is story for a purpose, and you just want people to really clearly hear it. If you're doing something like, I do a lot of gestures myself. If you're doing a lot of gestures, then people will start to notice that, and it can be a little bit distracting, especially on video. Okay. So there are your top 6 points for the plan to identify and then craft a story. And actually, we've come to the end of part 1. In part 2, I'm going to show you how to work that crafted story into your presentation. And then we're going to look at how the different ways that you can put a spin on that by a concluding statement describing how it's affecting you or your learning or your values or your methods, how that will help you set that up for the key message and the action that you want your audience or your listeners to take. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you watch the next video of how to use a personal story in your presentation. Thank you very much.